But I think very importantly, their distribution network that they built themselves is what's called a looped grid. So unlike the traditional central grid where you've got single long transmission lines that if there's an impact somewhere along that line, it can knock out power to a lot of people. The loop system allows that if there's an issue in one area, you can then redirect power super quickly through alternative routes, minimizing any disruptions. So I thought that was super awesome. And then they also realized that they were in a storm risk area. So many of their power lines are underground, and then their substations are fortified against strong winds and flooding. And some of them are actually elevated above flooding areas. And then lastly, they have mobile generators and response teams. Hey, power people, and welcome back to another episode of Renewable Rides. Today, Dan and I are going to talk about power resilience, especially in the midst of hurricane season. We're going to chat to you about some examples of how businesses and operations consider resilience, and talk about one really interesting example of Disney being one of maybe the most safest places to be during a hurricane passing through Florida. And then we're going to talk about the steps business leaders can be taking to think about this in a strategic way. But before we do, Dan, how are we?
Great to be back. Had a big week last week. We had our 2025 Strategic Planning Summit, got a lot of the team together from a variety of corners of the world. And I feel like we accomplished so much. And not just from a business perspective, but also just on a personal level, really being able to connect with folks that were constantly on video conferences and Slack communication with. Building those personal connections is always such a pleasure. I don't know, what were some of your reflections?
Yeah, I think definitely got a bit of a mental hangover from the energizing week. But I think big takeaway for me was remote work is incredible, but you can't beat it. Sort of in-person connection every now and then. Yeah, it forced me to get out for a walk today with Mel. And I think that's what prompted today's conversation, Dan, is we're walking along talking about the impending hurricane about to hit Florida, which is super sad because, the state is only just recovering from Hurricane Helene. And, 3.7 million people were out without power last week across, the east coast of the US. 500,000 of those were in Florida. And now we've got Hurricane Milton heading towards Florida, and Mel just sent me a stat that it went from a Category 4 to Category 5 hurricane in 6 minutes, the quickest hurricane to intensify at that speed of all time. So I think Florida's bracing for another impact this week, and wanted to chat today about resilience, because we're saying, what would we do if we were living there? What would be our reaction plan? And Mel jokingly said, I was reading that Disney is actually one of the safest places to be. And it forced me to do some research. And it turns out it actually is. So excited to share some of those learnings with you, Dan. But I know this is personal for you as well.
Certainly. It's I've been tracking with some of our family this morning as well. And it's been interesting to watch the intensification of the storm. I remember I looked either on Friday or Saturday before the weekend, and noticed that it was, I think, listed to make landfall at a Category 2. And so just since then until now, it's heated up to a Category 5. One of my wife's grandma's is based in Florida, and luckily, hopefully she gets no issues with the flight out tomorrow afternoon. But it had me thinking that while and not everyone's fortunate enough to be in a position to even leave. Certainly not all are able to leave on a flight, but that's an individual, and getting an individual out safely. But at the same time, doesn't mean that we can relocate our facilities, whether they be distribution centers or manufacturing centers or healthcare centers or otherwise. They are, right there in the path, and it's pretty scary when a hurricane is barreling down on you. So this is a very important topic for me. On a personal level, growing up in wildfire country, this is all but a reality, just a bit of a different reality than hurricanes. But I think the overarching thing is there are pathways to being prepared, and it's important for business leaders to start thinking through it. So, yeah, why don't you share a little bit about some of the research that you found and digging into Disney, and then we can touch on how business leaders should be thinking about it.
Yeah, I think what I found super interesting, Dan, because as you know, I'm not naturally a huge Disney fan, so I don't pay a huge amount of attention to it. I'd far prefer to be out in nature than in a lineup in the park. But what I always find super interesting about Disney is how they are willing to go beyond the facade of the building into the minute details to really help you experience this incredible opportunity when you come into the park. And that's definitely not possible without energy. And so what happened was back in 1967, Disney realized that energy and infrastructure were super critical to their operations in creating this incredible experience, that they created something called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And this was because they didn't want to have to rely on external parties like the local utilities for both water and power. They wanted to create their own entity where they could operate autonomously and have the powers to operate almost like a local government, but under their control, such that they could create this incredible experience in the best interests of the resort and the guests, but being able to move quickly and efficiently. And so what they did is they actually created an energy utility within the park and surrounding the park. And what's really impressive about this is it was very strategic, and they actually looked ahead of how much energy do we need? How can we ensure that we drive resilience, autonomy, and sustainability? And so what they built was their own energy utility. And so it's made up of multiple parts. I think what's most exciting for me is, often when we talk about on-site energy and microgrids, people think that this has to be renewable power. And it's almost quite the opposite, especially under resilient designed microgrid. You have renewables as a component, but it often needs to be a hybrid combination of different technologies to ensure that you have that resilience. And so in the case of Disney, they rely on a cogeneration plant, which is a combination of using gas to power the facility and then generating steam to help heat and cool systems throughout the resort. So that's kind of the backbone of their system, is this cogeneration plant. And then they supplement that gas power with then solar power. I think everyone's probably seen the picture of the Mickey Mouse shaped solar facility right down there in Florida. It's over 50 megawatts on its own, and then they have smaller subsidiary solar assets surrounding it, obviously designed for weather events like these hurricanes, so they are not vulnerable to high winds and rain. And then on top of that, they've got backup diesel generators which come online when needed. I think what's really interesting is they designed this to be operable independently of the grid very early. So they built in these microgrid capabilities. And obviously over time, they've really innovated around the data and AI they use to operate and optimize the asset. But I think very importantly, their distribution network that they built themselves is what's called a looped grid. So unlike the traditional central grid where you've got single long transmission lines that if there's an impact somewhere along that line, it can knock out power to a lot of people. The loop system allows that if there's an issue in one area, you can then redirect power super quickly through alternative routes, minimizing any disruptions. So I thought that was super awesome. And then they also realized that they were in a storm risk area. So many of their power lines are underground, and then their substations are fortified against strong winds and flooding, and some of them are actually elevated above flooding areas. And then lastly, they have mobile generators and response teams so that, worst case scenario, if any of those assets that we just talked about failed, they can then respond quickly to issues and deploy mobile generators, as well as having these mutual aid agreements with external utilities and energy providers, such that if they need support beyond their in-house capabilities to access resources or capabilities to bring the grid online or manage any issues, they've thought about it. So I think it's just a really nice demonstration of having purpose built an energy system that's designed specifically for the safety and reliability of guests. And it is apparently proven that people have been in Florida either pre, during, or after the hurricane, and things operate super seamlessly and they continue to have an incredible experience. And so I thought it was a really impressive case study. And what I really liked most about it was the way the entity represents itself. There's an image in an article I just wrote, is they consider themselves to be the invisible team. So they're the backstage, behind the scenes, providing all these services, and you'd never know the complexity that goes on. And so I like that when business leaders think about a microgrid is, this is an asset that performs for you on your behalf, but it doesn't have to be in your face. It doesn't have to be front and center. It's this backstage asset that just ensures that you perform optimally all the time in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, they call it the happiest place on earth, but I think it's also Disney has very much planned through this to think like they've been in Florida for decades, and they see how things are changing, and I think they have a lot of families and a lot of people that are there during these types of events as well. So as we were preparing for this, I wanted to see some of the other examples of just recently with Hurricane Helene having rolled through, what some of the other examples are. And a couple that I came across was one was a community, so a 37 home subdivision that had a community microgrid that was able to maintain power and stay online. And it also even just made me think of our own, team members. We have a couple team members located in Georgia, and talking with one of them last week, having generators to power their homes and continue to take care of their families. I think that is in many ways a smaller microgrid there on its own right. Beyond that, I did come across a post from Duke Energy talking about how they were able to maintain a community microgrid in North Carolina, in Hot Springs, North Carolina, and this was a renewable system. So this was 2 megawatts of solar and a 4.4 megawatt hour battery storage facility that they finished building in 2023, and they were able to bring that community, that mountain town community, back online. And it's interesting. Even they posted a subsequent post, and this was on X or Twitter after they posted the original one, saying that they had initially intended to provide 4 to 6 hours of backup power. And they've managed the output of the system to provide energy to that downtown of that town continuously and serve them much longer than originally designed. So I think that's the other beauty of a renewable system, where if you are able to generate some of that solar power, you may end up getting even more resilience than you had initially anticipated. A couple others that I saw were just the rollout of mobile power stations, which are their own microgrid in their own right, and even made me reflect on one of our customers, a large food distributor that has locations throughout the Southeast, and they've got mobile generators that, if a particular facility, they're within a 6-hour drive of any of like these 4 or 5 facilities, and if one of the facilities goes down, they'll drive a rather large multi-megawatt generator to that facility. Now, I guess I'll have to ask my contacts there what happens if multiple facilities go offline at the same time. But I think we're seeing more and more companies adopt these technologies. And I think especially as we see more prominent businesses that resilience is critical, you think the data center world is continuing to monitor how these impacts. So the good news is there are opportunities, and they're not just money sinks. There are great financial opportunities to have this resilience. And it's important for business leaders to remember that the only way you can truly be resilient in one of these outage situations, whether it's a hurricane, a wildfire, a squirrel running into a transformer, is to have on-site power generation and storage. And so, Gareth, how should a business leader be thinking about this?
Well, I think it's a really good question, Dan. I think the first thing is to actually think about it before it happens. I think the biggest issue we see today for many companies is that they only think about resilience once the power is gone, and then they're in a scramble state trying to recover operations. And that's definitely not where you want to be. And so, we have insurance policies for many aspects of our business. And I think this is actually one of the most profitable insurance policies you could ever have for your business, whereby, you can invest in a system that can support you during times of need. But when you're not using it in those times of need, it's actually reducing your operating costs, increasing your profits, reducing your emissions, and creating all these additional benefits, which many of us do not gain from paying into insurance premiums typically. So I think a really powerful opportunity. So I think of it as an opportunity, consider the risk early and often. As corporate enterprises, we all go through risk planning processes. As part of that risk register that you've likely got, my big ask would be, first of all, assess what the risk is to your business. Where across your portfolio facilities are your facilities already experiencing outages, or are your neighboring facilities experiencing outages? So where is your highest risk? And there's some obvious spots, isn't there? There's obviously Florida in the southeast because of hurricanes. Texas has had a lot of issues because of its grid independence and not being interconnected to other areas. In California, you've got the wildfires and more. So where are your facilities located that are susceptible to risks? Then across your facilities themselves, what will the impact be to the facility? It's like we talk about, not all facilities are created equally. So you may have a small warehouse that requires very little energy, and it's not worth necessarily having a backup power system to keep the lights on there. You're happy to sort of shut up shop and wait for the storm to pass. Whereas if you've got a manufacturing facility or a facility with critical loads, it's really important that they become the priority sites to assess where you need that resilient power. And then within those facilities, there are particular loads within your facility that will be more critical than others. So maybe you're dealing with molten metal. You can't afford that equipment to shut down and destroy all of the equipment that's associated with it, versus you may have a small office building that just has lights on. So really understanding, what are my critical loads within my facility? What are the areas where I can't afford the power to go off? And then looking at how you can then scale back across your facility to deprioritize loads as needed. And then I think most importantly is what is the cost of an outage? Because this really then supports you to plan. And we've seen several examples of this, ranging from a small local manufacturer here that was experiencing 12 to 20 outages per year. And they're not a major operation, but during an outage, they have to shut down a shift. And the CEO was estimating that was a $50,000 loss per shift without considering the equipment losses. He's lost motors and drives. And so a power outage is more than just lost productivity. It can also really impact equipment. So that's on the small end of the spectrum. And then Dan, we recently chatted to a large automaker that was saying they lose over $1 million an hour when they have a power outage at just one of their production facilities. And so, it's very quick and easy for you to see, by deploying an on-site energy system and being able to ride through these situations, how quickly you can have them pay off. And then there are some facilities where it's just a priceless investment, because we've got one biotech customer, and we've talked about them before because this is a really important example where they collect skin biopsies and they store those biopsies. And you can imagine when the power goes off and you can't continue to store them at the right temperature, you can lose them. And the last thing you want to be doing is expecting your patients to be coming in and providing additional biopsies. It may not be possible. That time lost may be critical to the knock-on health impacts downstream. And so lots and lots of risks and opportunities to consider, but they would be the key ones. Dan, what are your thoughts on how companies have thought through this process and assessed, where is my risk? What's my risk going to cost me? And where do I want to prioritize my time and effort in investing in a system? How have we seen we've been able to create the biggest value for customers?
The most important thing is just understanding what is the business case. And I think more and more companies, I've even been pleasantly surprised by some customers that we work with having folks on the team with resilience or reliability in their titles. So these are people that are solely focused on how do we make sure that we maintain these systems, maintain these facilities, keeping them online. And I think this is unfortunately, we're going to see this as a growing skill or role within an organization. I think the biggest is most companies, we've even talked to some utilities that struggle to have like easy access to data on where are the outages. And so any given company that has dozens, hundreds, or more thousands facilities, getting an understanding of which ones are at the highest risks. That's first and foremost. And then among those, where are the facilities that actually we care about keeping online? To your point before, not all facilities are created equal. So that's first and foremost. And we can do that in a matter of seconds from looking at a whole portfolio. And then it's really understanding the business case for deploying the on-site generation and storage, and understanding, is it a renewable only system or solar and batteries, or is it more of a hybrid system where you're bringing in some fossil generation? And it really depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. But it's a complex equation when you're looking across these breadth of technologies in a dynamic market, and we've seen quite a few customers of ours really benefit from going down that path. And again, they're depending on where these are located, there can be an economic opportunity beyond just mitigating the risk of deploying these systems. So happy to meet with anybody, talk through some of the strategies, but really it's a matter of identifying where are you at risk, whether or not those are facilities that you should be concerned about, placing a dollar value on it, because that will help make a business case, and then getting to work from there.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for me is, for your business or for your community, for your personal house, would you prefer to rely on thousands and thousands of miles of exposed transmission lines and a single power facility to ensure your power stays on as a hurricane bears down? Or would you prefer to rely on a system that's been specifically built for your needs and objectives, and it's been hardened to meet sort of increasing severe weather events? And when we do this right, we get huge stackable benefits: safety, reliability, autonomy, cost management. And this allows us to continue operating, continue to keep people safe, and really optimize our businesses. And I think you're spot on, Dan. I think more and more businesses are going to do this for their own needs. But I think we're also seeing more and more businesses who are very critical to their communities, seeing this as an opportunity to continue to build brand and trust and be there for the community, and offering these energy resilient centers where people can come for shelter, buy food, charge their phones, and have access to cool or warm air depending on the current conditions. And I think that's a very exciting prospect for businesses that want to really double down on their brand and truly be a partner to their communities. So I'd say let's close out by businesses and communities are going to continually face these challenges. Let's pursue that owning of our energy and not being reliant passively on other people to solve it for us. On-site energy enables us to do that today in a very profitable and sustainable way, and drive that kind of truly reliable energy future.
Absolutely. Till next time.
Cheers. We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.